I thought I won everything when the judge ruled in my favor for the apartment. But my ex-wife's parting smile hinted that some victories are just elaborate traps. The final bang of the gavel felt less like a sound and more like a physical shockwave that confirmed my victory. I kept my expression neutral, a carefully practiced mask of professional detachment I'd perfected over a decade in family law. Across the courtroom, Sarah didn't cry. She didn't glare. She just looked at me, and a tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of her lips. It was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes, and for a split second, a cold sliver of unease slid down my spine. I dismissed it immediately. It was the smile of the defeated trying to save face. I'd seen it 1,000 times on my clients' opponents. I had won. That was the main thing. I had won the apartment. Our apartment. My apartment. I'd paid the down payment with my signing bonus before we were even married. I'd covered the mortgage every single month. My name was on the deed. In the cold, hard logic of the law, the world where I lived and breathed, her claim was emotional, sentimental nonsense, and I had systematically, ruthlessly dismantled it. I used her own words from therapy sessions against her. I pointed out her lack of financial contribution. I painted a picture of a man who had built a kingdom and a woman who simply wanted to inherit it without lifting a finger. It was brutal, but it was effective. It was my job. That evening, I stood in the center of the living room, holding the keys that were now solely mine. The movers had already taken her things, or so I thought. But as I walked through the rooms, I noticed how much she'd left behind, not just furniture, but small personal things. The worn copy of her favorite novel on the nightstand, the collection of mismatched coffee mugs she'd insisted on buying from thrift stores, a half-used bottle of her lavender-scented lotion on the bathroom counter. It was odd. It felt less like someone had moved out and more like they had vanished. Still, the sense of triumph was intoxicating. I poured myself a glass of 25-year-old scotch, the kind I saved for closing major cases, and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city glittered below, a sprawling galaxy of lights that I felt I commanded from my 34th floor throne. This view, this space, this was the proof that I'd made it. I had clawed my way up from nothing, and I wasn't about to give up a single square foot of it. The first strange thing happened around 2 a.m. I was woken up by a smell. Lavender. It was faint at first, just a ghost on the air. I figured it was the lotion she'd left in the bathroom, and I made a mental note to throw it out in the morning. I rolled over and tried to go back to sleep, but the scent seemed to grow stronger, thicker, as if someone had just walked through the room. I sat up, my heart thumping a little faster. The apartment was silent, steeped in the deep quiet of the late-night sky. I got up, checked the locks on the door. Both were bolted. I walked through the apartment, sniffing the air like a bloodhound. The smell was strongest in the master bedroom, seemingly emanating from nowhere and everywhere at once. It was unnerving, but I'm a man of logic. There was a rational explanation. It was in the vents, lingering in the fabric of the curtains. It would fade. It didn't fade. The next day, it was still there. I bought a can of industrial-strength air sanitizer and sprayed every inch of the apartment until it smelled like a sterile hospital. For a few hours, it worked. But by evening, the lavender was back, a soft, floral mockery of my efforts. It was starting to get under my skin. Then came the music. It started on the third night. I was working late, reviewing a prenup for a new client when I heard it. A melody so faint I thought I was imagining it. I paused, took off my headphones, and listened. Silence. I must have been tired. But then I heard it again, a slow, melancholic piano tune. It was achingly familiar. My blood ran cold when I recognized it. It was the song we danced to at our wedding. I shot out of my chair. My first thought was my phone, my laptop, the smart speaker in the corner. I checked them all. Nothing was playing. I ran to the door and pressed my ear against it, listening for any sound from the hallway. Nothing. The sound was coming from inside the apartment. It was so quiet, so subtle, that if you weren't listening for it, you'd miss it entirely. It seemed to be woven into the silence of the building itself, a phantom orchestra playing just for me. For a week, I was haunted. The persistent, sweet smell of lavender and the barely audible strains of our wedding song. I was sleeping maybe 2 hours a night. My work was suffering. I was snapping at my paralegal, making simple mistakes in filings. I felt like I was being psychologically tortured. I tore the apartment apart, searching for some hidden Bluetooth speaker, some timed air freshener, some diabolical little device she must have hidden before she left. I found nothing. I was losing my mind. Last night was the worst. The music seemed louder, the melody clearer. I finally pinpointed its source. It was coming from the wall behind the headboard in the master bedroom, the main wall, the one that backed onto the building's central core. There was nothing on the other side, just concrete and steel beams. Standing there with my ear pressed against the cool drywall, the music was unmistakable. It was inside the wall. My rational mind fractured. This was impossible. In a fit of desperate, sleep-deprived rage, I started examining the wall, running my hands over every inch of it. I was looking for a seam, a crack, anything. That's when I noticed it. A power outlet near the floor, slightly askew. I never would have noticed if I wasn't looking so closely. My heart hammered against my ribs. I sprinted to the kitchen, grabbed a screwdriver, and scrambled back. My hands were shaking as I undid the 2 small screws holding the faceplate. I pried it off and peered into the dark, dusty space inside the wall. Tucked into the recess behind a bundle of wires wasn't a speaker. It was a single, freshly cut stem of lavender. I stared at the lavender stem, my lawyer's mind racing, trying to process evidence that refused to be processed. It was impossible. The faceplate had been screwed on tight, covered in a thin layer of dust. No one had touched it in years. And the flower, it wasn't dried or old. It was vibrant, almost dewy, as if it had been picked just hours ago. A chill, deeper and more profound than any I'd felt before, settled into my bones. This wasn't just a prank. This was a message, and I didn't understand the language. I threw the flower away, screwed the faceplate back on so tightly the plastic creaked, and spent the rest of the night with every single light in the apartment blazing. The next day, I had the locks changed. I hired a security company to install the best deadbolts money could buy. I even had a small motion-activated camera placed discreetly on a bookshelf, aimed at the bedroom door. I was taking back control. I would gather evidence of her harassment because it had to be her, and I would bury her in litigation. I went to work feeling armed, fortified. When I came home that evening, the apartment was silent. The air was clean. I checked the camera footage on my phone. Nothing. 12 hours of a static, empty room. A wave of relief washed over me. It was over. She'd seen the new locks and given up. I walked into the kitchen to pour myself a drink, and my heart stopped. Sitting in the middle of my perfectly clean stainless steel sink was another single, freshly cut stem of lavender. I didn't scream. I didn't panic. A cold, terrifying calm descended. I reviewed the camera footage again, frame by frame. Nothing. The front door hadn't opened. The windows were locked. No one had entered the apartment. Yet there it was. Physical proof that the impossible had happened. The lavender smell returned that night, thicker than ever, and the phantom music started up again, its melancholic notes feeling less like a memory and more like a funeral dirge. I couldn't take it anymore. I found Sarah's new number from her lawyer and called her. She answered on the second ring, her voice infuriatingly pleasant. "Mark, to what do I owe the pleasure?" "Cut the crap, Sarah. I know what you're doing," I spat, my voice shaking with a rage I could barely contain. "The music, the flowers. It's harassment. It's illegal, and I will sue you into oblivion." There was a pause on the other end, and then she laughed. Not a mocking laugh, but a soft, pitying one. "Music? Flowers? Mark, are you feeling all right? You sound terrible. Maybe you should get some rest. Winning isn't everything, you know. Sometimes it costs more than you think." "How are you getting in?" I demanded, ignoring her condescending psychoanalysis. "Getting in? Mark, I gave you my keys. I haven't been near that place. Honestly, I don't ever want to see it again. It has too many memories." Her voice was so sincere, so convincing that for a horrifying second, I almost believed her. She was a master. She was gaslighting me on a level I couldn't even comprehend. "Listen," she said, her voice softening. "I know this has been stressful. Just be careful not to damage the place. You fought so hard for it after all." And then she hung up. Her words, "damage the place," echoed in my head. It wasn't concern. It was a taunt, a clue. She was telling me where to look. The wall. It was all about the wall. My obsession, which had been a low hum of anxiety, roared into a singular, defining purpose. I had to know what was inside that wall. I didn't bother with tools at first. I just punched it. The drywall gave way with a satisfying crunch, my knuckles screaming in protest. The music stopped. Instantly. The sudden, absolute silence was more shocking than the sound had ever been. My breath hitched. I was right. I clawed at the hole, tearing away chunks of plaster and insulation, my suit jacket and tie forgotten on the floor. The hole widened. I could see into the dark cavity between the studs. It wasn't empty. It wasn't just wiring and insulation. It was full of things. My fingers trembling, I reached inside and pulled out the first object my hand found. It was one of her ugly, mismatched thrift store mugs. My blood ran cold. I reached in again. A faded Polaroid of us on our honeymoon, smiling like strangers. Again, the silver locket I gave her for our first anniversary. It was a tomb, a shrine to our dead marriage, sealed inside the very foundation of my victory. I felt a wave of nausea. She hadn't just moved out. She had performed a kind of surgery, excising every memory and burying it in the walls. My hand plunged back into the dusty darkness, searching for a speaker, a device, anything that would make sense. My fingers brushed against something cool and metallic, with a jagged edge. I wrapped my hand around it and pulled it out into the light. It wasn't a speaker. It was the shattered remnants of my favorite Scotch glass, the one I had used to toast my victory just a few nights ago. A glass I knew for a fact I had broken and thrown in the trash. Myself, only yesterday morning. My mind went completely blank. The shattered glass in my hand was an artifact from a different timeline, a piece of yesterday buried in a tomb from months ago. I stumbled back from the wall, my breathing ragged. I wasn't being haunted by Sarah. I was being haunted by the apartment itself. The lavender, the music, the objects, they weren't pranks. They were echoes. Memories physically manifesting in the space where they were made. The place I had fought so viciously to claim was rejecting me. It was Sarah's home, not in a legal sense, but in a way that defied deeds and court orders. It was imbued with her spirit, and it was treating me like a foreign invader. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a bronze bookend from my desk, and went back to the wall with the fury of a man possessed. This wasn't about finding a speaker anymore. This was an exorcism. I hammered at the drywall, tearing it down in huge sheets, dust and insulation filling the air, coating my throat. I didn't stop until the entire section between two studs was gone, revealing the dark, hollow space within. And there it was. At the bottom, nestled in a bed of insulation and forgotten trinkets, was a small lead-lined box. It looked old, almost antique. It wasn't something Sarah would own. It had to have been here before us, left by a previous tenant. A small latch was on the front. With trembling fingers, I flipped it open. Inside, resting on a bed of faded velvet, was not a device but a yellowed, brittle piece of paper. It was a letter, written in the elegant, looping cursive of a bygone era. It was dated 1952. "To whomever finds this," it began. "My name is Eleanor Vance, and this was my home. My husband, Arthur, built this apartment for me. He poured his soul into these walls. When he left me for another, the court gave him the apartment. He said it was his name on the deed, his money that paid for it. He did not understand that a home is more than bricks and mortar. It is a vessel for memories, for love, for life. And when that life is ripped out, it leaves a void, an echo. He won the property, but he could not live here. The apartment would not let him. It remembered me. It played our song. It filled his rooms with the scent of the lavender I grew on the balcony. It tortured him with the ghost of what he had lost until he could bear it no more and fled. If you are reading this, I suspect you have made the same mistake he did. You have won the battle for the walls, but you have lost the war for the soul within them." I dropped the letter as if it were burning. It all made a terrifying, supernatural sense. I was Arthur. I was the fool who thought ownership was 9/10 of the law. I looked around the room at the gaping wound in the wall, the dust-covered furniture, the glittering city lights outside that now felt like 1,000,000,000 mocking eyes. I hadn't won anything. I had won a cage. A beautiful, expensive 34th floor cage that would slowly drive me insane with the ghost of the life I had so clinically destroyed. Sarah's little smile in the courtroom. It wasn't the smile of the defeated. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret. She knew what this place was. She knew it would do her fighting for her. I didn't even pack. I walked out of the apartment with nothing but the clothes on my back and the old letter in my hand. I went to a sterile hotel downtown and slept for the first time in weeks, a deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning I called my lawyer. "Draw up the papers," I said, my voice hoarse. "I'm signing the apartment over to Sarah, no conditions." He was stunned. "Mark, are you sure? After everything you did to win it?" "I didn't win it," I said, looking at the letter on the hotel nightstand. "I just evicted the wrong tenant." I had the deed messengered to Sarah's new address. I didn't include a note. There was nothing to say. A week later, my lawyer forwarded me an email from her. It was just a single sentence. "Thank you. I hope you find a place that feels like home." I never saw her again. I bought a small, characterless condo in a different part of the city. It has no memories, no echoes. It's quiet. Sometimes late at night when the city is still, I think I can catch the faintest scent of lavender on the breeze. And for a second, my blood runs cold. But it's just my imagination. It has to be. I lost the apartment, the money, the prestige. I lost the war. But in doing so, I finally won back my peace. And I learned a lesson that no law school could ever teach me. Some things, once broken, can never be owned again. They can only be haunted.